Hello again. Gary Stearman here with another Prophecy in the News update for Tuesday, May 18th. And as we continue to follow the news from Israel, it follows exactly in line with Bible prophecy. You may recall that in a recent prophecy in the news, I wrote an article that I entitled, As Prophesied, Israel Loses Her Friends. And of course, top among the friends that Israel is losing is the United States. Israel is called in prophecy a nation not desired. And I think it's worth re examining this in the light of a news story which we're going to touch on in just a moment. Zephaniah chapter 2, verses 1 through 3 begin this way, and this is Zephaniah speaking to latter-day Israel, and there's no doubt about the fact that this is a latter-day prophecy. It says, "Gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired." It's talking about Israel. And Israel, I guess if you could call any nation on earth not desired, it would be Israel. And then there is this: before the decree bring forth, before the day passes chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you, seek ye the Lord. This is a warning to latter-day Israel before the tribulation. This is a pre-tribulational warning. J.R. and I have spoken about this particular portion of Scripture many times. Clearly, Israel is going to reach a state of war prior to the Great Tribulation. And this is recounted in several different prophecies. Well, we come now to a news release dated May 17th, Debka file. Headline: Brazil and Turkey bolster Iran's nuclear drive. Well, how about that? How about, would you believe that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has acquired help from Brazil and from Turkey to put together a stash of nuclear weapons? Here's the story, and I quote, "Iran can keep its nuclear program afloat with a quiet mind and without fear of international harassment, thanks to the intercession of Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and Turkish Prime Minister Recep Erdogan." They clinched a deal in Tehran, and by the way, this was on Monday, May 17th, that's yesterday as we speak, for Iran to export some 1,200 kilograms of its lightly enriched uranium to Turkey for reprocessing to 19.5% grade. Now, if you know anything about the refinement of uranium, when you bring it to 19.5%, what you have is weapons grade plutonium, the real stuff. And we're talking about 1,200 kilograms. You can multiply that by about 2.4, and that gives you approximately a ton and a half of enriched uranium. And here we have the Brazilian president, the Turkish prime minister sealing a deal with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad to help him fulfill his desire to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Here's the story continuing, and I quote, "The two leaders mounted their initiative on behalf of the nascent anti-American bloc, also backed by Russia." All right, now you have Turkey, you have Brazil, you have Russia, you have Syria, you have Hezbollah, you have Hamas. They're all coming together exactly as the Bible prophesied. And by the way, the timing couldn't be better, in my opinion, because we're also suffering a global financial meltdown, and the world's leaders are suggesting that the only possible remedy is to create a global government. Where have you read about that? Well, in the Bible, of course. This story is amazing. Although critics have said Turkey does not now possess the facilities for reprocessing enriched uranium to a higher level. That's at least what we know. It appears that perhaps they have a secret facility that we don't know about. By the way, the deal legitimizes Iran's right to enriched uranium of a higher grade. And by legitimizing, this is on an internationalist basis. That is, as far as the UN is concerned, since there are other nations now involved in the program, it gives Iran some legitimacy. They've been seen as a rogue nation. Now they're being welcomed into the arms of other men and other governments. This is truly, truly amazing. Well, Israel is losing her friends. You know, Micah, the prophet, talks about the latter days, and he describes Israel's plight. And again, Micah chapter 7 is a prophecy aimed at latter-day Israel, and I believe it's aimed at latter-day Israel as it exists right now, that is pre-tribulationally. In the transitional period prior to the tribulation, Micah chapter 7 says, "Woe is me, for I am as when they have gathered the summer fruits. And as the grape gleanings of the vintage, there is no cluster to eat. My soul desired the first ripe fruit." Israel is fruitless, if you will, abandoned, starving. Israel, according to Zephaniah, is called the nation not desired, a nation without friends. Verse 2 of Micah chapter 7 says, "The good man is perished out of the earth." Well, you know what J.R. believes about that verse, because that word perish, ovad in the Hebrew, means to disappear. The good man's disappeared out of the earth. There's none upright among men. They all lie in wait for blood. They hunt every man his brother with a net. In other words, there has been a complete degeneration of the ancient cultural and societal bonds that have held civilizations together. Friends, I hate to say this, and I don't want to sound pessimistic, but that's the way we're headed. And most of all, it's the way Israel is headed. As Israel's friends fall away one by one, as Israel's enemies coalesce one by one. It shouldn't be forgotten, by the way, that when Brazil and Turkey got together to solidify this deal, this in part speaks to Ezekiel 38. The famous prophecy in Ezekiel 38 mentions the allies of Gog. And here's the way it mentions them. It says Persia, Ethiopia, Libya. It says Gomer with his bands, and the house of Togarmah. That's Turkey, friends. And Turkey now has joined Iran. So clearly we have this alliance of nations scheduled to invade Israel coming together just as prophesied. By the way, you've wondered about Gomer? Let me tell you about Gomer. Gomer is now threatening, and that, by the way, is biblically speaking, is Germany. Gomer is threatening to pull away from the European Union and to become independent because they realize that bankrupted nations in Europe are going to pull them down if they don't separate themselves somehow. Who would they ally with if they separated from the European Union? Well, of course, they would ally with Russia. And that's exactly what we have here in Ezekiel 38. We have this alliance, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, Gomer with all his bands, the house of Togarmah, that's Turkey. And so, friends, even as we speak, Bible prophecy is being fulfilled before our very eyes. We're going to keep watching. We'll keep reporting day by day as long as we're here. But need I remind you that we're also looking upward, for our redemption draweth nigh. Gary Stearman with another Prophecy in the News update. Keep looking up.